I have nothing against Liberty football, and what they have done with that program has been incredibly impressive. But them losing last night was one of the best things that could have happened in regards to having the best version of the college football playoff possible. Why? Well, because there's more than a good chance if Liberty went undefeated, even with the light schedule they have, they'd be the G5 representative in the college football playoff. Because the odds of Army or Navy going undefeated are still pretty slim. Boise State, UNLV, and Memphis have a loss already. And it's even more evident now, after last night's game at Kennesaw State, that Liberty most likely would have gotten mopped against whoever they played first in the college football playoff, kind of like they did against Oregon in the bowl game last year, and that they aren't the best Group of 5 contender for us to put in that slot. The teams I just mentioned, Army, Navy, Boise, UNLV, and even Memphis, have an actual shot, I think, to win that first-round playoff game. So if you're like me and us, and you want the best college football playoff possible in its debut year, Liberty going down breathes life into these other legitimate contenders. Now the race is truly on to see which of these Group of 5 teams can finish perfect down the stretch, and just like the Power 4 conferences around them, it's filled with parity. And that Group of 5 slot is now immersed in the parity as well. And that is the best case scenario for all of us who want the best version of the college football playoff. David Cone, former Michigan quarterback and just a giant of a man. My brother, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver, and he's got a really good mustache, a nice personality, and he makes a mean French toast.
See, this didn't feel authentic.
It was authentic. That's as authentic as I can.
Be
nothing's
honest.
good enough for you.
It can't be
your generation's.
Okay,
dude.
0% chance you've ever made French toast. So how could it be
that's what I'm talking
honest?
about. Already taking shots.
0% chance.
I just gang up. Welcome to the show, ganging up on Blaine.
That's not.
That's
you
it
do
is.
it to
Good,
yourself.
I'm ready.
Hold on,
Let's
hold on,
go.
hold on.
Me
Okay.
and the French toast.
Question for him.
Don't Dr. Strange, my brother.
Have you ever made French toast?
Yes, I have.
That's a lie.
Yes, I have.
All right.
Dave.
How
do you know? You don't know my truth. I know my truth
You
over
don't know
here.
his truth, David.
Has he ever made French toast?
I think he has. Blaine took a lot of cooking classes when he was younger. He used to wear the chef hat around and stuff.
Well, like Forrest Gump's legs, I stand corrected.
Yeah. Ooh,
Is
that's
he
a,
like me?
that's a good. You've been waiting to roll that one out. But speaking
How dare you?
about classes, Kennesaw State put on a class last night. 0-6, getting their first FBS.
How did you hit that
Liberty.
one?
It's 5-0.
How did you
I
hit
just took
that
him to
bet?
cover. I didn't take him to win outright. I don't think anybody did, except if you played or coached for Kennesaw State. But David, back to the Group of 5 playoff scenario, because we're going to get into the Power 4, the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, the Big 12. We want to know what you think, because there's some wild scenarios out there. And by wild, we really don't mean, hey, can this team out of nowhere make the playoff? It's when you look at the tiebreakers and the way that the table is being set for this playoff. Now with the Group of 5, we're going to be able to have the best Group of 5 team in there, because I don't think Liberty, even if they went undefeated, right, and got that slot, is better than Boise State.
Yeah.
I don't think they're better than UNLV. I don't think they're better than Memphis. I don't think they're better than Navy. I don't think they're better than Army. Do you think that was a good thing overall for college football last night, that Liberty lost? As unfortunate as that was for them.
Well, I think that it was, and this isn't even the Liberty team that we saw last year. That team last year was better, and if Liberty went undefeated, I think you could make a logical argument that they should be the representative. But I think that we're going to be better off for that, because when it comes to these Group of 5 teams, so many of them across the country not only play Power 4 opponents, some of them play multiple Power 4 opponents, and it's really hard to penalize them for the strength of schedule if a team like Liberty with their schedule goes undefeated. But now with Army and Navy not only going to play each other at some point, right, but also having to play Notre Dame, I think we're going to get an honest viewing of what they're able to do. Obviously, Boise State was able to keep it close with Oregon. Let's see if they're able to run the table. UNLV, we got a big one tomorrow night, don't we?
Without a doubt. And this is the big one tonight for UNLV. If you're a UNLV
tonight,
fan, you're rooting for Syracuse tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Because they beat you. You want Syracuse.
And so I'm about to get into that one.
As humanly possible. I know I don't want to go too far ahead. But Blaine, over to you. If Army or Navy goes undefeated, David brought up they both play Notre Dame. It's going to be tough. One of them will be in there. One of them will be the Group of 5 representative, and they should be. But if they don't, out of all these one-loss teams, and I wonder if we could pull up Boise State's schedule and UNLV and Memphis's schedule as well, because we've talked about Army and Navy's a little bit. Out of all those teams I just listed, who would you take as the best Group of 5 team right now? Who do you think would give that Group of 5 slot? And we're assuming it's going to be the 12 spot, right? You would think so. We'll see. But who would you think would be the best team out of the group?
Army, right?
That's where I'm
I mean,
even
I
over
even-
Boise State and Genty. I'm leaning Army as well.
Yeah, if you're going off the criteria of putting them in, they'd be one loss Notre Dame. Are you saying they would beat Notre Dame?
Well, regardless of record, do you think Army is better than Boise State? Do you? I think overall they are.
I feel like it's a pick 'em.
I do too.
I feel like it'd be a pick 'em. If you line them up on a Saturday, it'd be a 50-50 pick 'em, and I'd probably lean Boise State because of Genty at running back. I mean, sooner. I don't think a group of 5 should be in the playoff.
I
Or at
mean,
least
but they are.
get an automatic bid in the
But
playoff.
they are.
But if you have an Army team that loses to Notre Dame, and let's say it's close, and they're up against a Boise State team who lost to Oregon. And that was a 3-point game. Again, this is where we talked about, the selection process is going to happen before Army and Navy could potentially play each other.
And this is why we keep saying Ashton Genty being in the Heisman race is a huge plus for Boise. Because again, this is a business. All right, they're going to want to put 12 high-profile teams in there. And yes, Boise State is technically a high-profile team, but having Genty makes them more high-profile. So if you're a Boise State fan, and I want to go through their schedule, and UNLV's like I mentioned in 1 second, but I just don't see a way. And if Boise State runs the table, and everybody has one loss, that's what I'm saying. Army and Navy both have one loss.
Yeah.
Everything is equal. There's no way in hell that if Oregon wins the Big Ten and goes undefeated, and that's your only loss, that you don't put Boise State in there. You almost have to. Because that would be the best loss. Even, David, if Army lost to if Army lost to Notre Dame and they only have one loss, that Oregon loss by Boise State is still better. UNLV lost to Syracuse, you're out of it, right? Because that loss to Oregon was better. So
that's where Memphis comes back.
That's where Memphis. But you look at Memphis's loss to Navy. Like, you're still not going to get in over a one-loss Boise State. But I want to go through that schedule real quick.
All right, Boise State, you're on the road to UNLV. Then you have San Diego State at home, Nevada at home, at San Jose State, at Wyoming. And you finish the year with Oregon State at home.
So it's UNLV. That one's going to take care of itself. They play each other. And then that game against Oregon State. Outside of that, Boise State, I think they're going to roll through that. Right? But wouldn't you think? They're going to be the favorite most of those. What about UNLV? Obviously got Boise. Then who do they have after?
You're on the road at Hawaii, San Diego State at home, at San Jose State, and finish the year against Nevada.
God, that game's tomorrow, right? Boise and UNLV?
Yeah.
Is that a de facto almost play-in game for the group of 5? I know it's still way early.
Be early for that.
But I know it's early, but we want to know what you think. Out of those teams we listed, which group of 5 team do you think is the most dangerous? David, you're looking at the Power 4 kind of scenarios here. Kind of walk us through where.
Just a couple wild scenarios. We've hinted at a couple of them, but I'll start with the ACC one. Obviously, we've talked about Miami and Clemson, both undefeated right now in conference play, and they don't play each other in the regular season. So we've been saying, hey, wouldn't that be a great ACC championship matchup? But keep in mind, Pitt and SMU are both also undefeated in ACC play. Now, Pitt, the remainder of Pitt's schedule is challenging. All right, I want to read it off because they host Syracuse tonight. We're going to be talking about that game. Huge matchup, prime time. They get all the eyeballs tonight. After that, Pitt goes on the road to play SMU. They host Virginia. They host Clemson. They play Louisville on the road, and they play Boston College on the road. There's not a surefire win in any of that schedule for them.
Agreed.
But they do get to play SMU. Okay, so we do get to see that game, and that's at SMU. But keep in mind, SMU doesn't play Clemson or Miami. So we could have a scenario there in the ACC where you have 3 undefeated teams within the conference. That's something to keep an eye on. And you have SMU playing in the conference championship game with how they started the season. That's incredible. The Big 12, obviously BYU. I mean, just the season they're putting together, we've been talking about it every single week. They're undefeated in conference play, as is Iowa State, and they don't play each other. Now, Kansas State, with their one loss, that's to BYU, and they play Iowa State the last game of the season. So that could decide who goes to the conference championship, assuming that BYU keeps up what they're doing. But an interesting thing, and I was breaking this down for about 30 minutes yesterday, Colorado's only conference loss is that loss to Kansas State by 3 points. And they don't play BYU or Iowa State for the rest of the season, and they'll play 2 teams ranked ahead of them. Cincinnati this weekend at home, and then they play Texas Tech. Okay, so Colorado's not out of this thing to be able, because remember
and they
that
lost to Kansas
Nebraska.
State, so they'll lose the tiebreaker to Kansas State if they all end up with one loss.
But Kansas State also has lost to BYU, and they play Iowa State, so hanging around. Just a lot of these teams hanging around.
I mean, it's the scenarios, and not just in the conference, getting to the conference championship game, but how the selection committee would. I mean, if let's just say, let's just run the ground ball out, that SMU goes undefeated in the ACC, Miami and Clemson go undefeated in the ACC and play each other in the conference championship game, would the committee put the team that's left out of the ACC in the playoff over a team that loses the conference championship game? This goes back to what we talked about and how that conference championship game can get you that automatic bye and that automatic berth, that 1 through 4 seed. But if you lose it, and we're going to talk about this in the SEC with Blaine here in a second, could give you that third loss, and I don't know how the committee is going to treat it. We've never seen this before, so there's no precedent that's been set on it. But the poll question is which team gets more, or which conference gets more teams in, the Big 12 or the ACC? I mean, could we see a scenario where 3 teams get in from the ACC or 3 teams get in from the Big 12 just because of the way the conference race?
It's very possible. For that to happen, Notre Dame would have to go ahead and take themselves out of it, which, like we said, they play Army and they play Navy, and you're going to have to play USC at the end of the year in a rivalry game. And then I think some of those teams in the SEC that are on the fringe, they need to go 9-3 instead of 10-2. I'm thinking about the Ole Misses and some of the teams Blaine's about to get into.
Yeah, Blaine, get into the SEC. You know, we're going to talk about the teams that are at the top. Obviously, look at LSU and Texas A&M and Georgia and Tennessee all with 1 loss. But these teams with 2 losses, right? You look at Ole Miss that has 2 losses, and overall, obviously within the conference too. But Ole Miss has 2 losses. Alabama has 2 losses. If the magic number is 10-2, then they really have to thread the needle all the way out. What are you kind of seeing in the Southeastern Conference right now?
I mean, not only those teams have to thread the needle, and you can get into the conversation. I mean, if Vanderbilt right now wins out, they could be in the conversation of being the SEC championship. And right now, one kind of thing I was interested in is all the favorites right now. If you look through the schedule and the conference game, were to win out, it'd be Texas 7-1, A&M 7-1, Georgia 7-1, and LSU 7-1 with Missouri going down to 6-2. How would you?
If they all win out.
If they all went out right now, how would you navigate through that?
Wow.
Well, and you have the tiebreakers within the conferences, because remember, getting rid of divisions in the conferences set up this situation where we have like 6 tiebreakers, and the last ones you do a Sudoku blindfolded somewhere in a foreign country to see who does it. But I believe the first tiebreaker outside of head-to-head, which in that scenario, Georgia would have beaten Texas, right, which you laid out. Tennessee plays Georgia, so that's going to work itself out. There's a couple of these in this round-robin format that we had the last 4 weeks where it's going to work itself out. But when you look at the tiebreakers, the next tiebreaker behind head-to-head is the combined, it's your record against common opponents, right? All the teams that you played compared, Team A, all the teams that they played, that Team B played, and who had a better combined record after that, which I don't think we're going to have to get to the third tiebreaker after that. If we do, then some craziness really ensued. But when you look at the rest of the schedule in the Southeastern Conference and you look at the Big Ten, now that Michigan's kind of out of it, that Oregon-Michigan game's taken on a little bit of a different flavor than what we thought. But Ohio State still has to go play Penn State on the road, right? Michigan still has to play Ohio State, even though, again, that game feels a little bit different than we thought it was at the beginning of the year. And Indiana, I mean, if Indiana loses to Ohio State and wins the rest of their games, that's only 1 conference loss. So, I mean, there's a world in which you have a one-loss Penn State, an undefeated Oregon, a 1-loss Indiana, and a 2-loss Ohio State in the league, where we would have Oregon having to play either Indiana or Penn State, depending on that tiebreaker, which, to me, since there's no head-to-head, common opponent was Ohio State, Indiana lost, Oregon, or Penn State won. Therefore, I think Penn State would be able to get in it because that would trump kind of everything else. So
imagine going 11-1 if you're Indiana and you can't even make the conference championship.
But what if that actually helped them?
Yeah.
What if that actually helped them get into the playoff?
Because you'd be in the playoff.
Because you would have to be. There's no way in hell. I don't care if it was some brand new team they just put in the Big Ten this year. You go 11-1 in the Big Ten, or you go 11-1 in the SEC, and really, I mean, the ACC and the Big 12 too, you need to be in the college football playoff. So if you're Indiana, how does an 11-1 looks a lot better than an 11-2?
Sure.
And I think an 11-2 may give the committee an excuse to not put a team in, maybe not from the Big Ten, but from the ACC or the Big 12. So
but that first round bye is, guys, so nice to have.
Well, it's huge.
It's so nice to have, just to get that time off and to know that you don't have to deal with one of those teams.
But also you could be hosting too, though. You could be hosting your first-round playoff game, which just from a revenue standpoint and, recruiting on campus, Kirk Cignetti could probably do a lot with that, too.
Oh, well, it would be. Well, this is why when we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of this thing, and we talk about this in college basketball all the time, but not for home court advantage, right? Just to be able to play a lesser team, you would think, but we know how drunk the college basketball tournament is. Seeding is huge in this. Because if you're outside of those first four, right, that get the bye, and then there's no second-round games at home, obviously you get the bye, you're playing in the second round, the better seeded you are, you're going to get that home game, which, the gate's huge and all that, but that's a massive advantage.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Penn State getting a home game
Can't wait.
to start over? Some of these just meccas of college football. Now, that's probably the coolest part about this whole thing.
Yeah.
You think the atmosphere during a regular season game is nuts? Imagine a playoff game at one of these places. Imagine a playoff game in Athens, at Georgia, where they're hosting, right? It is the scenes, the aesthetic kind of view that we're going to get is going to be unparalleled ever in the history of college football, in my opinion, because you are literally playing a home game in the postseason for a chance to move on to win a national championship. I can't wait. There's a lot's going to be developed. We're going to see teams win. We're going to see teams lose. I kind of want a little bit of chaos at the end. Do you guys agree? Do you want some chaos?
Oh, yeah.
At the end?
There's going to be chaos.
I know you want chaos.
Yeah, I want it to burn.
I want chaos.
Yeah, I want it to burn.
But, I mean, we say that, but then last year we had enough chaos that, I don't know what's happened with the
Well, I
Florida
don't want
State
it to the
program.
point
That
where,
was
like,
so
the
much chaos.
entire-
That was such
They
an
took it out on
anomaly.
Kirk Herbstreit. There's
Yeah,
so much
man. Like,
chaos.
that was like, that wasn't even mean. That was sad.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Like, it's one
That's
of
what
those
chaos
things,
gets
like,
you.
It wasn't like, I couldn't even point and laugh at it because it was like your dog ran away.
It was super sad.
Will you just say one more time quickly the four teams you mentioned, if they went out? It was
Texas, LSU,
Georgia.
Georgia, and Texas A&M. But Texas A&M and LSU play each other.
favored.
Yeah, he's talking about
Be
the
favored.
favorite team.
Gotcha. Okay,
Favorite.
thank you.
Well, that could still
And then I could
that could still work out like that because LSU doesn't play Texas. I don't think. So if Georgia wins the rest of their games, they'll have one loss, right? And it'll be that one conference loss. If Texas wins the rest of their games, including a win over Texas A&M, they'll have one loss.
Mm-hmm.
If Texas A&M beats LSU and loses to Texas, they'll have one conference loss. And if LSU drops the game to Texas A&M, they'll only have one loss. So in a world, that could actually work out unless there's two teams that play each other that I don't know. If you're the committee, you got to put all of them in, right? You got to put all of them in.
Probably.
Especially if Notre Dame doesn't make it.
Probably, which isn't crazy
The
because
crazy
almost
thing about
all
it,
of
the
us
one
had
team
four
that probably
SEC.
wouldn't get in would be the team that lost in the conference championship.
This is how is the committee in the chat? And when we get to the phone calls, I want to know what y'all think. Should a team be penalized, right, for losing the conference championship game that either gives them a second loss, right, or a third loss?
Yeah,
So
because in that scenario, Georgia and Texas would pick up their second loss in the conference championship.
Yes.
LSU and Texas A&M would pick up their third because they each have one out of conference
That's exactly right. So does the committee say, you know what? No. You lost in the conference championship game. You're 10-3, and I'm talking about 10-2 teams. You're 10-3. All right, that's 3 losses, even though you had to play an extra game against a really good opponent. We don't view that as putting you in front of a team that is 10-2 that didn't play in the conference championship game. I don't know the answer to that because we've never seen this before. But just real quick, before I get to this first read, what would you take? You're in the committee.
I've been saying from the start that I think the loser of the SEC championship game and the loser of the Big Ten championship game will both get in.
I agree with that. But if you had to pick, if I said, David, Team A is 10-3, their third loss came in the conference championship. Team B is 10-2. They didn't play in the conference championship game. You can only pick one of them. Which one would you pick?
I think at that point I would go strength of schedule and eye test.
So you would treat it like they're almost both even and go to a tiebreaker, even though they have different
Which
amount of
team
losses?
do I identify as being a better football team throughout the course of the season and who played a tougher schedule to get there?
Do you look at non-conference schedule maybe?
Sure.
Do you weigh non-conference? What about
All
you,
the
Blaine?
games.
Which
Same
one you
way.
taking? Same
Right?
way. Hey, what's up, YouTube? Appreciate you guys stopping by. Do me a favor. Subscribe. Thanks.